This video is about my updated thoughts on Wriothesley following new findings and more advanced theory crafting. First and foremost, I want to quickly address that my previous claim on Wriothesley's power level was simply an estimation based on early calculations, and I explicitly said that things could very likely change. While I made sure to add context to my claims, I realized that as they spread around, this context can easily get lost. I will be more cautious in the future about my judgments. Before we get to the actual point of the video, I'll remind you all that I have a Patreon where I plan to discuss my analysis more in detail, analysis that requires me quite the effort, and you can show your support by subscribing and leaving a thumbs up. So, what exactly changed about Wriothesley? It would be more accurate to say that there were things I didn't consider before. Specifically, why I took into account the Hitlag that would come with his hits. I didn't initially consider that this Hitlag would also extend his elemental skill duration, and allow him to execute the same amount of combo hits regardless. Still, this is a double-edged sword, as Hitlag often comes with rotation extension repercussions, but we'll get to these later. If you don't know what Hitlag is, don't worry, I will explain it in the video later. Also, this video will contain a brief outlook on melt teams and how viable they can be. Regarding the new combos, compared to the last video I made, that is now down due to powers above me, it seems it's possible to deal 3 more hits, and this just makes his damage go higher than I previously expected. As I said about 30 seconds ago, however, Hitlag is a double-edged sword. While in low Hitlag scenarios, his elemental skill seems to extend just to 12 seconds of length based on what I've seen, which is manageable in several teams rotations, anything higher would make the combination of his skill and burst reach around 15 or 16 seconds on length, meaning he likely wouldn't fit in any 20 seconds long rotation anymore. The reason this is potentially bad is because the current teams is being analyzed on don't favor rotations that are longer than expected, so it's possible that for high Hitlag situations, his best team selections might vary compared to the norm. But what is Hitlag exactly? Hitlag is none other than a delay inflicted on your melee hits when they come in contact with opponents. Hits normally have a specific duration in terms of frames, and what Hitlag essentially does is inflicting a delay to that duration, effectively slowing your character down. But the time you lose that way isn't wasted, as active effects like Wriothesley's elemental skill store that time lost and extend their own duration by the same amount, allowing the active character to deal the same amount of hits regardless, just slower. The reason this might be worse for Wriothesley than others is simply because of how long his base duration is. A character like Raiden also gets an extension of similar proportions, but since her base burst duration is just of 7 seconds, her team rotations can perfectly endure even a 4 seconds extension and be mostly fine. On the other hand, high Hitlag scenarios might push Wriothesley to rotations lengths that might hurt his team overall DPS. Of course, this is something that will require deeper level of team analysis to certify, which I don't currently have. It's good to remember that ranged characters like Wanderer have no Hitlag, meaning that they have a set rotation length that will never vary if executed perfectly, and this effectively gives them a practical advantage. Still, assuming low Hitlag scenarios, so scenarios where you don't face high Hitlag opponents like Ruin Guards, Wriothesley stacks up much better to the competition than before. In my past video, I've shown a comparison with Wanderer and Yoimiya that just focused on their personal damage. It seems that confused people, since they thought that was the entire team damage being compared. So here is a team-wide comparison, that also includes shielded teams for Wanderer and Yoimiya. To make things fair, considering Wriothesley doesn't need a shielder for the most part. In general, his current team output seems to be in line with Wanderer and Yoimiya's shielded teams. For their hyper variants, a reason they have the advantage compared to Wriothesley is that the rotation is tighter due to no Hitlag. Still, if you're in the camp that thinks Wanderer and Yoimiya are unpractical without shielders, this puts Wriothesley in a really good spot compared to them for you, since he can perfectly compete with the more defensive variants of their teams. I'm not done yet. As promised, here is a mock-up of a possible melt team structure for him. For now, I'm assuming a combo that only includes 2 charge attacks. Since his charge attack is a no internal cooldown move, he could technically abuse it more often to get more melts, but since he's a catalyst user, his stamina expense will be double of a character like Hutao, so that's not practical. For now, I'm assuming a low charge attack combo for flexibility. Much like Yoimiya, he will only be able to amplify some of his hits, but that's fine since it still magnifies his damage enough for it to be worth. I'm not totally sure about what hits will exactly melt, however, since it's something that's both based on the internal cooldown related to hit count and the one related to total time passed. I will go more in detail about this in a future video tied to melt composition specifically. For now, I tried to time the hits and predict which ones will melt, but this is likely not completely accurate. Still, even with scuffed assumptions, the team performs very nicely, about as well as the hyper team I previously talked about. Note that I'm not considering Kazuha here, since swirling cryo with him on melt teams with Shenling around is a mess, and also Shenling is assumed to have Kitten Spear on top of around 220 energy recharge. This is not so bad, because she's just a minimal contributor to the team damage here. Overall, it's a quite competitive option that adds flexibility to his team choices. As a whole, I now have a better opinion of Wriothesley than before, as he at the very least seems to have a set of teams that perform quite decently, putting him in a solid spot. Still, I'm relatively pessimistic about the possible negative repercussions of Hitlag. I will keep working on him and keep you updated on future findings.